Mr. Patel, does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
It's not a complicated question. Does Donald Trump appear anywhere in the Epstein files?
I didn't say it was a complicated question. I just didn't hear you, so my apologies.
Three minutes ago, Dan Goldman did something nobody in Washington had the courage to do. He didn't whisper it in a closed-door session. He didn't leak it anonymously to a reporter. He didn't hint at it during a press conference. He stood up, opened a folder, and said the words that every senator in that room had been terrified to say out loud. And he said them directly to Kash Patel's face on live television, with the cameras rolling and the microphones open. And Kash Patel, the man who has spent the last 11 months telling Congress and the American people that the FBI is cooperating fully with every document request, that there is nothing to hide, that the Epstein files are being handled with the utmost transparency and care. Kash Patel sat there and could not say a single word. And the reason he couldn't say a word, it has something to do with a name that has been connected to Jeffrey Epstein for over 20 years. A name that every person in that room already knew, but nobody, not one single senator, had been willing to say it out loud in a hearing like this until today. Watch this video until the very end, because what happens in the final 2 minutes of this hearing is something I've never seen in any congressional session I have ever covered. And if you are new to this channel, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because this story is not over. It is just beginning, and I need you to be here for every single development. But before I take you into that hearing room, I need you to understand something, because this is not just about what happened today. This is about what has been happening for months. Quietly behind closed doors in documents that the American people were promised they would see, documents that never came. And the question that nobody in Washington wants to answer is simple. Why? Let me take you back to the beginning. The Senate Intelligence Committee held an oversight hearing this afternoon. On paper, it was routine. Budget allocations, personnel updates, a standard check-in with the FBI director. Nothing that would make headlines. Nothing that would stop people in their tracks. That is exactly how Dan Goldman wanted it to look. Because if Patel knew what was coming, if he had even a single minute to prepare, to coordinate with his legal team, to get on the phone with the White House, everything Goldman did in the next 40 minutes would have been neutralized before it ever reached the American public. Goldman knew that. Goldman planned for that. And here's where it gets interesting, because what Goldman did was not a surprise attack, it was a trap. A carefully constructed, meticulously researched trap that took months to set up, and Kash Patel walked directly into it. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me describe the scene first. Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room, wood-paneled walls, polished table, cameras pointed at the witness. Patel was already seated when Goldman entered. 3 lawyers behind him, 2 aides with folders, that posture he always has, shoulders back, chin up, the look of a man who has done this dozens of times and survived every single one. He looked comfortable. He looked prepared. He looked like a man who had absolutely nothing to worry about. Goldman sat down on the other side of the table. Calm, quiet, almost friendly, he nodded at Patel. Patel nodded back. Nothing in that moment suggested that what was about to happen would end careers, shake institutions, and force a conversation that Washington has been trying to bury for over a decade. The first 30 minutes were exactly what everyone expected. Other committee members asked their questions. Cyber threats, foreign interference, budget requests. The Epstein documents, Goldman said, the ones your office told this committee would be released on the 14th. The ones that have been sitting in FBI evidence storage for 6 years. The ones that contain information the American people have been asking about for over a decade. He paused. Where are they, Director Patel? Patel's jaw tightened. You could see it if you were watching closely, just the slightest shift in the muscle right below his ear. Senator, as I have stated in previous testimony, the FBI is committed to releasing all documents that can be released within the bounds of our legal obligations and national security considerations. Goldman nodded again. That is not what I asked. I asked where they are, but I am going to stop right here, because what happened in the next 30 seconds is something I've replayed dozens of times now. Because Patel did something that trained politicians almost never do. He hesitated, not a long pause, not something most people would even notice, but Goldman noticed, the cameras noticed, and the room noticed. Because in that half second of silence, Kash Patel made a decision, and the decision he made is the reason everything that followed went the way it did. Goldman pulled out a document, single page, unclassified. He held it up so the cameras could see it clearly. This is an internal FBI memo. He said, dated the 3rd of October, it was sent from your office to the Classification Review Board. He looked at Patel. It instructs the board to delay the release of all Epstein-related documents that are currently scheduled for public disclosure. He set the memo down on the table. Would you like to explain this to the committee? Director Patel's lawyers shifted behind him. One of them leaned forward to whisper something. Patel didn't look at him. Senator, classification reviews are standard procedure. They happen regularly across all document categories. There is nothing unusual about a review timeline being adjusted based on operational needs. Goldman let that answer hang in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then he pulled out a second document. This is a letter. He said, from the committee to your office, dated the 12th of September, it specifically requests that all Epstein documents scheduled for release be released on schedule. He looked up. No delays, no additional reviews, no exceptions. He set the second document next to the first, and then he pulled out a third. But I need to stop here for a second. If you have watched this far, you already understand how important this is. This is not politics. This is not theater. This is a United States senator sitting across from the FBI director with actual documents proving that the FBI deliberately delayed the release of files that the American people have been demanding for years. Like the video, write in the comments, share this with everyone. This conversation needs to reach people who are not paying attention yet. Now, back to what happened. The third document Goldman pulled out was different from the first two. It was longer, multiple pages, and it was not from the FBI. Goldman held it up and turned it slowly so the cameras could read the header. This, he said, is a timeline, a document my office put together over the last 4 months. It tracks every single Epstein-related document that was scheduled for release since January. And for every single document, it shows what actually happened. He set it down in front of Patel. Out of 47 documents that were approved for release, Director Patel, how many do you think actually made it to the public? Patel looked at his lawyers. They had nothing. No notes being passed, no whispered advice. He was completely alone. I would need to review the specific details. Senator Goldman shook his head. Slowly, the way a teacher shakes his head when a student gives an answer he already knew was wrong. The answer is 11. 11 out of 47. The other 36 have been delayed, reclassified, or quietly removed from the release schedule entirely. He leaned forward. 36 documents, Director. That is not a delay. That is a pattern. And here is where it gets explosive, because Goldman did not just have the number. He had the reason. And the reason is a name that appears in connection with Jeffrey Epstein in document after document, year after year, going back to the 1990s. A name that the FBI has been aware of for over 2 decades. And a name that, according to the documents Goldman's office obtained, appears in every single one of those 36 buried files. Goldman didn't say it yet. Not at that moment. He was building toward it, because when you say that name in a congressional hearing, on live television with the cameras rolling, you don't just make headlines, you make history. And here is what you need to understand before Goldman says it, because the context matters. The Epstein files have been released in stages over the last several weeks. Millions of pages, thousands of documents. And in those documents, certain names keep appearing. Flight logs showing trips on Epstein's private jet. Witness testimony from people who were at Epstein's properties. Internal FBI emails discussing individuals connected to Epstein's network. And one name keeps coming up again and again in documents that span decades. Goldman had done his homework. He knew exactly what was in those files, and he knew exactly what Patel had been trying to keep out of the public eye. Now, here is the part that nobody in that room was ready for. Goldman opened the timeline document to a specific page. I want to focus on one document in particular. He said, document number 23. This document was approved for release on the 5th of September. It passed every legal review. It was cleared by the classification board. It was scheduled for public disclosure on the 19th of September. He looked at Patel. It never came out why. And here is where I need to stop and tell you something. Something that changes everything about this story. Something that explains why document 23 was never released. Why it was reclassified the night before it was supposed to go public. Why Kash Patel has been sitting on it for months. Document 23 is not just any file. It is witness testimony. Testimony connected to Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach property. And that testimony contains a name that Patel has been working very hard to keep sealed. The name is Donald Trump. Now, before you react, let me be very clear about something. Donald Trump has not been charged with any crime in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. He has denied any wrongdoing. He has denied any knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities. But here is what the documents show, and this is not speculation. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is what is actually in the files that have already been released to the public. Flight logs confirmed that Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet multiple times between 1993 and 1996. An internal DOJ email from 2020 stated, and I am reading this directly from the document, that flight records reflected Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously reported.